your mind actually matters. My name is Syme, and we have my usual partners in crime, Tak, Adam, and Samad. Every week, the four of us discuss and debate the hottest topics as requested by our viewers and listeners. Today's topic is a gut-wrenching one, and it'll be an extremely difficult conversation to have, which is all the more reason we should have it. On the 4th of September, 5-year-old Mara was reported missing in her hometown of Karachi, Pakistan. 2 days later, her body was found. She was kidnapped, raped, bludgeoned over the head, set on fire, and her dead body left on a garbage heap. According to Karachi police, 45-year-old Nawaz Khattak has confessed to the crime and has been arrested. Khattak, originally from Peshawar, arrived in Karachi only 5 days before this incident. Less than a week after this horrific rape and murder of a minor, a woman in Lahore, also in Pakistan, was gang raped at gunpoint in front of her own children. The woman, a French resident, said her car had broken down on the highway after midnight, and she was waiting for the police when the attack occurred. Protests have erupted all over Pakistan seeking justice and legal reform, similar in momentum to the protests that occurred after the horrific Delhi gang rape in 2012 that shocked India and the world. While there's no denying that rape is a major problem in the developing world, Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, the list goes on. But I don't want us to forget that living in the relative safety of the West doesn't mean that women and children are immune from these incidents. Just last year, 21-year-old Aya Masawi, a Palestinian exchange student studying right here in Melbourne, was raped and murdered at a park on her way home. A rape shouldn't only matter if the victim has been murdered or the details graphic. A rape or any form of sexual violence or assault is a crime against humanity. We know that for men, us, discussing this topic cannot do it justice, nor can we even fathom the fear that women endure every time they step outside, and for some, even when inside their own homes. So I want to start today's podcast by asking our female viewers and listeners about their perspective. I urge you for your perspective. Do you think that men raised in Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh have a higher propensity for sexual violence? And if so, what could be some of the contributing factors, whether it be legal, social, cultural, or maybe even religious? Or do you think this sexual violence is as much a problem in the West as it is in developing world? So I'll open with that question. It's an open question. I know it's a difficult one. It's difficult for all of us. But we really want to have a female perspective in today's show. And while we wait for some questions and maybe your perspectives, I want to ask Samad, what are your thoughts on this matter? When you heard what happened, and not just in the case of Marwa, but then a week later, this gang rape of this a woman in front of her children, what was going through your mind?
To be honest, I didn't even hear about Murray's case until the recent case happened. I don't quite keep up with the news coming in from Pakistan, but the issue is that these things have become so common that it doesn't start at Murray. It goes way back, and there's so many cases that almost sound identical. You can just swap out the names, and you'll see that from a different every age group has almost a set story in the way they go about it. When it comes to the younger kids, it's of course it's the violation, it's the brutality that comes with it, and there's almost certain death that comes along with it, which I think is just absolutely. I don't even know how to put it. I can't even call them animals because I think it would be a disrespect to animals to begin with. Because the way that they're going about it, and the way that this culture has started to take some heat now, should have happened a lot earlier. Because you when you look into these stories, one thing you find is victim blaming, is
Mm.
finding excuses for these perpetrators. So these rapists, somehow they get some sympathy from people, which is absolutely ridiculous. And sometimes it's officials involved in sympathy, just trying to find a way to let them get away with it. Even when it comes to the charges, it takes forever because these court proceedings just go on and on and on. And depending on your um, political affiliation, who the party that's in power can also play a big role. So, for example, I think I explained this to you earlier in one of our conversations that if you belong to a particular ethnic group, and if that ethnic group is in power, you have a big chance. And if you belong to that same ethnic group, you have an opportunity. If you know someone, you have an opportunity to maybe get a reduced sentence.
Yeah.
Whereas these issues are so multi-layered, because you have, of course, the religious side of it, you have the ethical, the human rights, and you have all these things that come together. But somehow there's so many cracks that these people walk away, or walk away with a much reduced sentence. Um, and there's so much I have to say. I don't want to continue keep, saying what I have to
No,
say because I feel like
you've made some really very very great points, and there's it's we saw this happen after the 2012 Delhi gang rape case as well, and there was protesting and the perpetrators, the rapists were given a death sentence, and where is do you think that'll be the same case in these two incidents in Pakistan?
potentially that could be the case, but I still think that doesn't deal with the problem because there there's a part of re-education of the youth, especially the males, in that regards, because I feel like women are always under the microscope. If something happens to them, they're the ones who are, you know, carrying the burden of
Burden.
it for, yeah. They're the ones who are considered to be home wreckers, people who've committed the adultery. So it's almost like they share the sin with the one who's inflicting it upon them, which is absolutely ridiculous. But you hear people talk about um,
We
how
see this similar things in the West as well, right? In developed countries, in Australia, the United States, where that as people question, well, what
the
did she do
motives, yeah,
to deserve getting a beating from her husband,
yeah,
or what did she do to get
yeah.
deserve
How did
this?
she, yeah, how did she instigate? It's always about trying to find a reason, quote unquote reason, to I guess like to soften the blow
Mm,
of the topic, and that's how they get away with a lot of these things. And there's so many things, right? Like rape is it's not just the rape itself. There's sexual assault. There's catcalling. There's all these
mm,
issues that they start small. They start with little things, and then when they see they can get away with it, it's when these guys start to build that courage to do to go all the way, and to rape someone, and then on top of that, what you've done is absolutely there's no escape from that. I don't think in any society that act is accepted in any regards. But then to go on and to murder these women just goes to show like how far you've fallen away from humanity.
mm.
That that's just not a concept that you're familiar with anymore because you think life is just about you and you can do whatever you want to do
Well,
out there.
I mean, these criminals, right?
Yeah,
They kill the women to try and get away with the crimes that they've committed. That's the reason why they do it. Like it, I see it as a part of, unfortunately, the ever rising problem, of things like gang rapes and stuff that happen like in these countries. Like it I don't know. It's really tough, I guess, for me
It's a
to.
difficult topic to talk about, and I want to come back to some comments by one of our viewers. Sahiba said they definitely have more of a problem in South Asia because there's literally no sex education back there. The topic is taboo, and
I think intimacy in general is a taboo in the Desi culture, right?
yeah.
I don't know
Even
about,
a husband and wife
yeah,
who are married,
yeah,
in front of in-laws or in front of others, can't show intimacy
to of any, we're not
of
talking
any
about,
kind.
yeah, of
If it's
any kind, yeah,
a kiss on the cheeks,
yeah,
or
or the
even
forehead, or yeah,
sitting next to each other,
or
right?
holding
Is
hands,
Yeah.
it's considered, just
So I want to ask about maybe some of the psychology of people of rapists,
Mm.
and people who commit these, not just rape, but even then go on to brutally murder the victim. So, Tak, I want to ask you, what do you think, from your perspective, some of the psychology around some of these men? What are they thinking? What's going through their heads? And obviously, I also want our audience and our listeners to chime in and tell us their thoughts. These men, what are they? What's their psychological profile? It's a difficult one, but I want to openly have a discussion about what are the contributing factors. What are they thinking? Apart from they think they can get away with it. What are some of the other factors?
Oh, we are not getting sound from you, Tak.
Zero audio from Tak.
How
Look,
about
look.
now?
Technical
It isn't a
difficulties.
mind over matter show if we don't have some
Does it sound better
technical
now?
difficulties.
Yep, yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it sounds better
Can
now.
you guys hear me now?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
So I think it comes down from more of a cultural perspective where men have like quote unquote power, right? Like you even see how people have this conversation, even within their families and stuff. Like it's almost like in these countries and if people have like the family name, there's a lot of like that kind of thinking which like sort of internalizes through the generations. And so they see women as less than a person, but rather um, more of an object, or more of like, I guess, more of I wouldn't know how to put it into words, but like they see them as less than men.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
I think those are perfect words about
yeah.
what they
I think
view women.
very
In fact,
precise words. I
Yep.
mean, you're not mincing your words there. I think it's exactly, some the psychology of some of these men. They think they have power over women, and
Yeah.
they this is sometimes a demonstration of that power that they have. And Heba again made a comment here. They've been brought up to feel like they're entitled to women.
I mean, yeah, the way that, I've seen it with my own eyes, the way, they're okay with, grouping a woman, in a crowded market, and she may be with her mother or her children, but, you couldn't care less. You just, go up and group her, or make some lewd comment because, that's considered to be, oh, it's just a guy, guys are being guys,
And not
that's,
not even that, but it's a culture as well. Because I remember like you know back in Bangladesh, like my cousins will tell me, like, they get catcalled and stuff, and they're not allowed to
yeah,
say anything. And I'm like, yo,
Mm.
like, you can say something, and they're like, well, no, they can't, because then they'll like males will go and find out where this person lives and like just make life hell for them, or even attack them, kind of make them a target. Oh, this
Mm.
is
yeah, putting a target on
yeah,
your back, and
Yeah,
yeah, they
even
make
simple things as just just rejecting someone, right?
yeah,
That we've seen cases where that's resulted in those acid attacks and rape as well, just because the person has felt, as Heba mentioned, entitled to the other woman saying yes, for that woman to say yes, and that sense of rejection has been enough to set them off and commit a crime.
generational thing. Like they see how their fathers treat their
they're women, yeah,
women, and they how their grandfathers treat their women, and women are kind of in these countries more timid, and they've even built this culture that whatever your husband says you have to respect it. Like I know in India, like especially amongst the Hindu religion, they almost treat their husband like a god, you know.
Mm.
So you can't say anything against them. You're just supposed to take anything they say. So how do you even go about breaking that culture? Like, because it's not like it just happened and that's it.
overnight,
Like
yeah.
it's happened through generations. So
Mm.
to have that conversation, to not just to break it down, but to even have that conversation is difficult for countries like this.
Mm. Yeah, just to kind of articulate that psychological profile of these criminals and these rapists, I want to share a quote or some quotes by one of the rapists in the 2012 Delhi riots, because I think it clearly shows the psychology of these men, and so I'm sharing it with our stream, and I'll read this out. A decent girl won't roam around at 9 o'clock at night. A girl is far more responsible for rape than a boy, he said. And this is Mukesh Singh. This is one of the rapists of that very horrific, and it's so horrific that particular incident of that even I wouldn't be able to explain what
Is
happened.
that what the documentary India's Daughter is based
Yeah,
off?
that's
Yeah.
right. That's right. And so,
So
I
for
mean,
any of the
personally, I think that they shouldn't have given him a platform.
yeah, definitely.
But on the other hand, it's an insight into the mind of these crazy, power crazy individuals. So just continue reading some of the quotes, just so we better understand some of these men, right? Homework and housekeeping is for girls, not roaming in discos and bars at night doing wrong things, wearing wrong clothes. About 20% of girls are good.
So it sounds
Again,
like, oh sorry,
no, go ahead.
yeah. So it sounds almost like these guys have like a god complex. Like, oh, I have to right their wrongs. I
Yeah,
have to make sure I put them in their place. And I
she's
think
sinful,
that's
and I'm gonna put her in a
yeah,
place. Yeah,
and I think that's not just in those countries, but that problem also exists here, where it's this term that's been I've seen a lot on social media called humbling women, right? So it's like almost like these guys go out of their way to make women look smaller for their own sense of
Ego,
pride.
yeah.
Yeah,
and
for the
pride.
to feed
Yes.
their own ego, and it's like, you know, it just I don't know. For me, it doesn't make sense. But that's on a micro scale. But what this guy's talking about is definitely a god complex. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have to right their
Well,
wrongs.
I mean,
Just allow it as also, that kind of gives the also the impression that, just let it
But
happen,
who
because
was
it's
that
it's
person to let someone do something like that? If
well, yeah,
something's
they never
wrong,
think that way.
well, I
Yeah,
mean, it's gymnastics that he can try and come up with. Because if it was to happen to someone that he cared about, he'd be totally against it. But because it's him and he doesn't think he's done anything wrong, he's going to make whatever excuses that he wants, in order to justify
so
the degenerate
Sultan
behaviors that he'll engage in.
Sultan in the chat says doesn't sit well with me how they think killing them is solving the issue they created.
No, it isn't.
it isn't. Definitely
Yeah,
isn't.
yeah, because yeah, they think that erasing someone from this existence is okay because it protects them. Yeah, so that is
Yeah.
them valuing their own lives over the lives of other people. So yeah, I mean,
And just to get back to, there was a comment that the same guy made. They should come back. They shouldn't be out after 9 o'clock.
Mm.
Just to let you know, I'm pretty sure you guys have experienced this as well when you went back to Bangladesh. You know, the life starts in those countries after midday,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
carries on into, late night, past
yep,
midnight. It's very normal.
The,
These
these
countries don't.
countries with very hot temperatures, people sleep during the day, and
Yeah,
they
they live
they
during. Yeah,
live
the
during
night.
the
Yeah,
cooler nighttime.
yeah. So, that in itself is so problematic, and so
But
I don't even know
Yeah,
what to say.
it's
Like,
like
it's so
when it's
out of
actually
touch.
yeah, when it's the right temperature and weather to go outside, women have to stay home. Unfortunately,
Yeah,
only the
because they
men
have
can
to
go
cook
out
and
and enjoy
clean.
themselves. Yes.
Yeah, and the
you
guys can go out and hang out with friends.
but you even see like a lot of these cases, people try and justify like, oh, it only happens in the poorer regions. That's why
Oh,
it goes unnoticed and this and that. But there's so many cases where like I know in Bangladesh, I don't know how long ago it was, but there was it was like news everywhere, but pretty much the son of this big businessman in Bangladesh, he pretty much orchestrated a girl out told us to be like your house, you're like way too drunk, whatever. And then him and his friends pretty much Ubered her to a different area and they
Mm.
both like raped her. I don't know if they killed her, but yeah, it was just really bad. And it made news. Like I was surprised it even made news because his dad has a lot of influence. He's a big businessman in Bangladesh, owning really big company. I'm not sure exactly which one. And for it to make news was the surprising thing for me. Not that it happened, which is sad, but that's just the kind of
I mean, there's a lot of corruption within the law in Bangladesh,
Yeah,
Pakistan,
exactly.
India. So it's like, yeah, it is a surprise
It's
when,
surprising that it
you
made
know,
the news because these things
yeah,
just
I
get
think it
brushed
usually
under.
happens. The only time I feel like these things get away from these people is when an NGO gets involved, when they go and speak to someone who has some level of power or some level of media power, and that's usually when they're unable to keep it under the covers. And just like you mentioned, we talk about rape, but you also have to remember that a lot of these cases don't get reported for numerous reasons, and one of them is, of course, the victim blame,
Mm.
and the woman feels, like she's the one who allowed it to happen, and
Exactly.
she's the one who caused it, because she might have, she might be wearing something that was a little too tight around her body, so it became provocative.
Mm.
So anything that a woman does has to be under the microscope.
well,
And
yeah, they're
yeah,
reinforced into thinking that it's their fault,
yeah,
Yeah.
and that there are certain reasons, like even when it isn't the
yeah,
case, they will think that because of how they've been conditioned into thinking from, childhood, into how
yeah,
they should be or how they should behave or what they should do, that these must be the reasons why X or Y happened to them.
yeah.
But it's all about trying to like break people out of that conditioning. And I think Heba even said earlier about, like, things like education, like just, that's going to be
That's
vital
step
in trying
one.
to
Yeah,
change people's like opinions about um, you know the problems that are manifesting there.
Mm.
Pakistan, India,
Yeah,
Bangladesh,
and
all
this
these
this is
places.
why I have any statistics around rape, no matter where the statistics come from, it's very you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt. I mean, it has some meaning, but there's so many different factors that aren't taken into account, and some and touched on one of them, which is just the social norms of that country, where the family structure is kind of set up in that way, um, where members kind of hide when the
mm.
incidents when this happens, and we don't need to look very far, even in Australia, when the Catholic Church, priests had raped children within the church. Parents knew about it in Australia, right?
Yeah, and they kept it
Yeah,
quiet
And they
because it
kept
would.
it quiet because
Yeah,
yeah,
it would be confronting. It would thrust the family into the spotlight, and the cultural norm at the time was you endured it. You stay quiet, and it wasn't until we fully understood the 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 effect, the long term effect that it has had on so many of these victims, many who have committed suicide, who are now substance abusers, who have gone on to become predators themselves, that we kind of now say, you know what, we need to change the social norm, and some kind of transformative change needs to occur in some of these countries as well, and I um, this is just kind of one thing, right? And then there's the whole concept of dishonoring the family. If women in those areas, in these countries, experience rape, I mean, most of the time they wouldn't report it because the stigma that it would bring to the family, and even uh, some of them don't even understand that what has happened to them is rape, right? Because it may not have
especially when
been
they're younger. Especially when they're younger.
exactly.
Yeah,
There's no education. It's taboo to talk about
yeah.
it. Tak, you've gone quite. It's like what happens is in our podcast. There's four of us, but only three can be heard at any
oh,
point in
look, it's
time.
it's the three that
Can
the
you guys
people
hear
want to
me now?
listen to after all.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Can you
right.
guys hear me now?
It's a bit low though.
Yeah,
If you can bump it up,
it's a bit
bump up your
low.
gain. Yeah.
I hear him. Oh, we've
Bit low. Just rather than,
Yeah, a
yeah,
lot better.
sounds good, right?
How's it sound now?
Um,
Yeah. Okay. I was gonna point to the chat. Sultan said, "I feel like
Yes.
education is only a start. I think even if they did have a sufficient amount of sex ed, the way the culture is, how men are seen to be more superior, will keep this as a recurring
Well,
issue." Okay.
I see it as a culture problem, right? Like all the stuff that Simon was just talking about how the perception of women as being like a burden and being lesser than, like those all come like from culture. That
Yeah.
doesn't come from it. And you can put in as many kind of laws as you want to try and prevent, like, there are laws against rape in Pakistan, but that's not going to prevent yeah, that's not going to prevent rapes, like,
I
just
mean, they're
because.
brought
I'm,
up with this
I'm
mindset.
look, I'm actually going to question that because a very common narrative when it comes to, I'm not going to talk about India in this regard.
Mm,
I'm going to focus on Pakistan because, Pakistan claims to be an Islamic republic where
mhm,
the constitution is inspired by, the law of the book, right? So
mhm.
it has elements that come from Quran
Revelation.
directly. Yeah. And I think I'm going to take it back because every single time these topics are brought up, we get that blanket reply where it goes something like, the women have an elevated status in Islam, and Jannah is,
Under their
beneath the,
feet.
yeah,
Yep. Yep.
yeah, beneath the mother's feet, so there's all these quotes that we've almost memorized, but there's no it's not implemented, right? Like when it comes to implementation, these things don't exist. And I'm actually going to say one more thing because
I
the
know what
religious,
I think I know what you're going to say, and I want you to say it.
Ooh,
yeah. So I don't know if we're going to say the same thing, but the religious leaders in Pakistan were really quick to make comments about, do you guys remember the girl who, on
Yeah.
music videos where she was wearing,
oh, I think
yeah,
I on it,
on a
like an
killing, right?
on a
So she
killing.
was strangled to death by her brother, and her family at one stage exempted the brother, like, yeah, now we accept your apology, and so they were happy to let it go. There were so many
Madam,
comments
I'm
made
streaming
about her,
Quran.
the way that she dressed and the way that she carried herself in public. The same comments can't be made about, no, about these rapists, and rape is a very commonly occurring issue. So is molestation, so is lewd comments, but you never hear any of that in the Friday khutbas. You never hear that in any of the lectures, because the lectures are always about the same thing. Pray on time, pray 5 times a day.
They don't talk
Read.
about relevant
They don't
issues.
talk about any of the
uh,
relevant issues, and it's a
well,
common problem. So they're happy to comment. They're very quick to comment. For example, there was another thing. There was it became an issue where um, there's a famous Turkish show called Ertuğrul, Ertuğrul, which is based on. It's not
The
really
ultimate emperor.
historically correct, but it's inspired by historical events. And there were fatwas coming out from all these religious leaders that whether it's okay to watch it or not. So they're quick to make judgments on that, but on serious topics, these people are absolutely tone deaf. When they make comments, or they just don't make any comments at all. So, you know, and by the way, religious leaders actually have a lot of power in Pakistan because
mm,
people hide behind their rulings, and they also have a political influence. So
Yeah, but
we have
yeah.
if you look at from their scope, it's well, especially the people in Pakistan, if they do speak out against these, they might not have that platform anymore. So that's why I feel like they just
Well,
don't talk
if
about it.
you're up, look, that's it's
I
part
mean,
of
it's wrong.
Islam, right?
It's
It's
wrong.
part of
Yeah,
Islam
it
to
is.
correct the Islam
well,
was sent to, of course, to protect humanity from destroying itself, right?
Yeah.
mm,
That
I
was
mean,
one
it's
of
I,
its
only
I want to
functions.
protect
I want to come
humanity
back to a
when it's
point you made. Sorry, go ahead, Ted.
yeah, it's only protecting humanity when it's convenient for them.
yeah.
Yeah, and this is ties into what you said earlier, Samad, and this is kind of, I thought this was the line of reasoning you were about to make, and it's almost as though Muslims, and myself included in that group, is we kind of like point to, oh, look at this, how the Quran elevates women. Look at all these hadiths that you can construe as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam being elevating women. Some going as far as calling him a feminist.
Yeah. That's a
And then
very common
all these
statement.
hadiths
Oh yeah,
that
yeah.
say, mother, mother, mother. So it's like before it's the father, it's 3 times the mother, right?
Yeah.
And how how praiseworthy it is to have a female child. And we kind of always, as a kind of a Muslim society always point to these. I'll see how Islam elevates women and gives them rights and this,
Practice it.
so we can cover up the fact that we treat them like shit.
Yeah.
Look, it's Islam elevates, the Muslims don't. That's the difference, right?
It's more, for some people, it's more sentiments than actual practice. Like, how many of
Yeah.
these people
Well,
do you see actually treat the women in their life with respect?
yeah.
100%.
Tax got it correct right there. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's all, and it's like what you said, Simon. It is all like a smokescreen to kind of
Yeah.
obfuscate the ability to try and question, like their kind of beliefs and be like, oh no, we love women, but
Yeah, and
like you said,
it brainwashes the women
Yeah.
in those cultures also to believe in this fiction that, the Prophet ﷺ said this, Islam preaches this, and it keeps them kind of, well, yes, I'm part of this religion that gives me these rights. All the while, the social norms of the country have stripped them of all of those rights.
I think, and I kind of want to deviate a bit because I feel like there's another sort of dichotomy that's in the works to why this is a problem, and it's, I think, the rapid westernization of these Desi cultures and these Desi countries, where they're kind of in this weird overlap where these countries are very reserved and conservative,
Yeah.
and now all of a sudden they want to be, you know, have the same liberties as
They
the
wanna, yeah,
They're
and they also wanna.
they're staring at the barrel of modernity at the same time,
yeah.
right?
So
And
it's
on
like
the one,
these two kind of culture clashes happening at the same time. People are they're kind of confused in where they stand. Like, do they want to be in this more modern age, sort of where people have more liberties, or do they want to be more conservative? Because they might like bits and pieces from both, but they don't know how to go about it, right? And I feel like this affects women more than anyone because, um, like you see in Australia, right? You can at least have a discussion, and you have feminists, and you have people that have,
There are
these,
different sides to
and
the
they
same.
they educate men. Like, there's a lot of men here that might have had like some conservative views, but now over time and over people talking about it on social media and this and that, they've come to realize, okay, maybe I thought wrong this way. I can change my way of thinking. They've over time developed something that's more, I guess, they're more incorporating more
it's like, I
feminism
mean, they've
into
been
their thoughts.
social norms change because of certain forces, like usually pressure by certain lobby groups, certain movements, and so when the social, if you can create and change the social norm, then
Yeah,
anyone that's outside of that falls outside of what's acceptable. And so
yeah,
if you make it completely unacceptable, then people fall into line. At least many will fall into lines. You'll
yeah.
still have outliers, as
They
you
have
do, and
deviants,
which is
yeah.
why you have deviance, and we'll still have cases of rape, in the West. But we're open, we're free to talk about it, we're free to set the boundaries, and but you make an interesting point
Yeah.
around the clash of cultures, and
The point I was trying to make with that clash of cultures, though, is that you have over here, for women to do more things that other women in other generations couldn't, is only because the men here understand that, okay, this is the social norms. Men have become accustomed to it here, and they see it as socially acceptable. In countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, and that, you may have women that are pushing for it and, want to have the same liberties that women over here have, but the men there, they just won't accept it under any circumstance, right? So they'll find
Look, I,
any way to kind of deplatform, even if it means murder these women. Like,
I'd like to point out that one of the biggest proponents against women's rights were other women. So
yeah,
during
yeah,
that time, like and it becomes like one of the bigger enemies when it comes to the problems that they're going to be facing over in Pakistan too, because you're going to have a lot of people, not just the men, but you'll also have the
yeah,
women there who will
that's true.
also
Yeah,
be like, no, this isn't right, this isn't the way that the culture should be, or so on and so forth. So
yeah,
they're going to be people who are trying to be, I guess, culture shifters are going to have that particular problem as well, when they try and bring, like you said, like they're trying to take proponents from like Western culture, and they're trying to combine it with like the conservative, like Pakistani, Bengali, Indian cultures, and there's going to be a clash because it's not something that's happening
Yeah.
incrementally
No,
over time. It's happening
rapidly.
as one big like boom, and they want people to get with the program, but that's going to happen at a not at the rate that I think that we would like it to be. It's going to be something that has to change over time.
I do want to point out that even if you look at the 2012 Delhi gang rape case, they were young, and many of these gang rapists are young. I don't think for them it's so much a clash of cultures, as much it is there. There's other psychological,
It's a different mindset
things.
Sure.
altogether.
Sure, but
I mean, for some of the maybe older people, it's like, yeah, okay, they're facing the society has changed for them in the last decade or decade and a half so dramatically, right? I mean, just to illustrate the point, there's certain certain business parks or IT parks that have sprung up in Pakistan and India and Bangladesh, which used to be very considered maybe rural areas, very conservative rural areas, and almost overnight there's now discos and nightclubs and bars and women roaming the streets at night, and to them it's very confronting, right? But so that can cause some of the what we're seeing, and I want to talk about, like someone mentioned, education isn't the solution, or is
I think they said that
start?
It's only the start. I think it's
it was a
they're not
start,
saying
like,
that
as
it's
in,
not like a.
it's not a panacea.
I don't think I agree, but I kind of think it's a huge factor, and I want to. Again, I want to illustrate what I mean by this.
I think it's re-education more than education itself.
Well,
I think.
This is something, Adam, you mentioned. Women are considered to be a burden in some of these countries,
Yes,
right? And
correct.
One of the ways to change that perception is they're considered a burden because they traditionally bring in no income to the family.
Yeah.
Right? They bear children, and bearing children, although is the most difficult and challenging job. And under COVID-19, I'm at home with 2 children, so I can attest to how difficult and challenging that job,
Full-time job.
That full-time job is.
Yeah.
I do maybe hours of it here and there, but a full-time job is challenging, and it also allows the man to go out and work, because if the woman wasn't looking after his children, obviously hers as well, he wouldn't be able to chase a career. But kind of I'm kind of deviating a little bit, but coming back to the point is, if women can become, if as men who are not like those other men, we value our women, put them through good education, and get them established into a career, so that men don't consider them to be a burden, right? But I think that solves only the challenge of maybe domestic violence. It doesn't solve the challenge of some men who are not known to them out in the street, who target certain women and
Well, those make up like the minority of rapes and sexual assaults, although they are an important component. Like you're most likely going to like the perpetrators of sexual assault are usually someone that they know. So it would be someone who is an intimate partner. It could be like a family member. They're going to be statistically more likely the ones who are going to commit sexual assault or rape.
Yeah. There's a comment again. Hiba and Sabik have made. It starts from a woman giving birth to a girl and her family wishing it was a son.
Well, one of the big
That's
problems.
very common.
Very common.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure. I know it's a case in China, but I wasn't too sure in places like India and Pakistan and stuff.
And ironically, there's a really famous, I wouldn't even call it. There's a famous event if you look at in the Islamic history where newborn girls were buried alive, and and that part of the tradition was abolished and looked down upon, right? Like, it's a murder, of course, but on top of that, because it's based on sex and it has a broader meaning than just the murder itself, aspect of it is mentioned, when it comes to women's right. But then here we are again doing almost the same thing, where there's abortions, there's
Yeah,
illegal abortions,
that's exactly, yeah.
there's abandonment.
Mm.
You, I don't think you know this, but abortion is illegal unless it's based on medical reasons. But there's so many abortions in those countries, and the babies are just tossed in the bin, like it's just it's just rubbish,
Yeah.
garbage.
Um,
Just pick it up.
oh, I think I have it over here. If you just give me one moment, I'll bring it
And
up. But
and
I'm
just to
yeah,
go
sorry,
back
go.
to one more thing, there was not very long ago there was um, a women's march in Pakistan for women's rights, and they used a very typical feminist slogan, which was my body, my rules,
Mm.
right? You hear that very
Yeah,
often,
yeah, you were telling me about this
and
on
that
yeah.
became the biggest thing. It became so polarizing because there were so many political, religious leaders saying that they can't accept that slogan.
Hmm.
It was on
You know,
like their national TVs
yeah,
and
and
stuff.
it was
Like
it
what
was
the
it was
guy?
it was a hot discussion. People were getting so heated because because of that statement. But for some reason, when it comes to rape, it's okay for a guy, or it's somehow accepted in a way. It's not even accepted. I would say
Mm.
it's kind of brushed aside. He can go and violate a woman's body because
Even
she's out late at night, or it's an abandoned area, or maybe she's wearing something really tight. Her curves are showing. There's
no, now that you brought up the media, it brings about like a pretty interesting topic where I feel like there's a big problem in India as well. So you know, the amount of rape cases that happen in India are like really high compared to a lot of countries, and the biggest industry there, which is Bollywood. One of the biggest industry there is Bollywood. You see how they portray the women in these Bollywood films, and like because of these new progressions in like Western culture kind of shifting its way to mainstream
I mean,
Bollywood movies.
they have a title. They actually have a title for a girl who's in that movie. They call it the item girl.
Yeah,
Who's gonna dress really provocatively,
yeah. So
wear
they dress
skimpy clothes and dance.
yeah, they dress provocatively. Their whole role in that movie is just as the token, you know, um, kind of deviant girl
Yeah,
gets
who you can
around
do.
this and
Yeah,
Yeah,
that.
promiscuous girl.
promiscuous
Promiscuous, yeah,
girl.
and people
You can
and
treat her.
gets around.
Promiscuous
Yeah,
and the girl who seduces the women, the men,
yeah, the
The
right?
men.
men.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's
yeah.
like seductress, this and that, and in a country where rape is such a prevalent thing, do you think it's a good idea to have movies like that that portray women in that sense? You don't have movies where they portray women as like smart or educated or what these protagonists are in these films
It
rather
reflects
than
culture.
huh?
It reflects the culture.
It does reflect the culture, but like you see how through westernization you see Bollywood movies back in the 90s or stuff, like they don't really show like any of the the bad scenes. They don't show any of the sex scenes, this and that. And now like there's blown out like borderline pornography in these movies. Um,
Yeah, in many ways, I think Bollywood has now exceeded Hollywood in its grotesqueness.
exactly,
Uh,
and that was the point I was trying to get to.
yeah, yeah. I,
And it's not,
Well,
I mean,
Where
there's
the
probably
mindset doesn't
I
reflect
don't
it,
know.
right?
but it's
Like
like
the way that they're trying to
it's
be
not right to
progressive.
have it's not right to have that kind of media in a country where you know people still having these conversations. People can't even talk about rape, but then it reflects like these mindset for the young men watching this, and even kids, because kids watch these movies now as well, and they think, oh, this is what women are. This is how we treat them.
I mean, it's definitely not good role models to
It's not
have
good
like
role modeling.
on
Yeah,
your in your sorry, Bollywood industry.
And mind you, the way that it's taken is if you dress a certain way, you're asking for it,
yeah, yeah,
right? Like, and that is also reflected in the Western culture, because that's what you hear all the time, that oh yeah, she was dressed a certain way, and the guy thought that she was putting out.
mm,
Yeah.
Hey, Samad, I want to ask you a question.
Yes.
Uh, Primarily because I want to go back to uh, the the horrific case around Marwa's death,
Yep.
and rape and death.
Yep.
So I mean, it's a high-profile case. and one of the things what I'm concerned about is generally in countries where corruption and there's lots of corruption and within institutions and it's generally dysfunctional. When a high profile case like this happens, do you think the police who are investigating the murderer and who have the rapist and whoever who arrested this guy Katak, I should say, that they've just found a convenient patsy, or do you feel that this is they've done their due diligence and justice is being served? Because it took them 3 days to find this individual, and to me, this
he
guy,
admitted
he's a
himself?
non-local. He's a non-local, so he only arrived in to Karachi 5 days prior to this incident. He's a drug dealer. He's a drug addict, I should say, not drug dealer, drug addict, a traveler. And it sounds like it wouldn't take a lot of pressure, possibly
convincing,
beating the crap out of this guy to make a false confession. Because it's such a high-profile case, and they want to solve it as quickly as possible. And so my concern is, do you think that it's possible that this guy is the criminal? This is the actual rapist, or they've just got some convenient patsy?
There's a lot of convenient patsy with a very similar background, especially in Karachi. In fact, people from his locality are quite infamous for being involved in these crimes. Kidnapping.
Peshawar?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say. Look, Peshawar people are very nice people. I think it's mostly people who are, either homeless or looking for a quick dollar. They make their way down to Karachi because it's a big city. There's a lot more happening. Karachi is also very high on crime. So mugging, carjacking.
It is very densely populated.
Very densely populated, and people do get away with a lot of crime. So I think it attracts.
The crime generally is.
It's a major city thing. So, because of the chances of you getting away with it, it attracts a lot of these people to these cities because there's more opportunity to commit crime, and there's a higher probability of running away from the law, and especially when the law is so complicit when it comes to these things. It's sometimes even if a policeman catches you, they will give them 200 rupees or buy them a bottle of alcohol, because apparently nowadays they love drinking alcohol at work, and get away with it. And the other interesting thing that you have to know is that in Karachi, the police force is predominantly not local, right? And that creates a big problem where the police officers, including the seniors, are not elected from the city, so they have no allegiance, they have no sense of belonging when it comes to doing their job. So they do as they please. They pick up their paycheck and they go on with their lives.
Not for the community, but rather for them.
So do you think then there's a risk that this person that they've caught
potentially,
is
definitely
goaded
that's
into a confession?
Yeah, that is a real big possibility, because it just solves the crime. There's no way of I'm pretty sure the girl probably has no memory because she's dead of what happened. So there's no way to confirm. She's been burnt, so there's no actual DNA analysis that can prove. So it's non-conclusive, but because he's given a confession, it become they don't have to further investigate this, and it's a quick wrap up. Look, he might have raped someone, he might have done a bigger crime, and they might have given him a deal where they say, hey, you do this or you're gonna die anyway.
You take the fall for this.
Yeah, you take the and he could be so high on drugs, he doesn't even remember what he did, and they probably talked him into believing that he did it. So there's definitely a possibility of that, and that is a very common thing, and I'm glad that you saw it that way, because a lot of people would see, oh yeah, this is an open and shut case.
I'm glad we caught the rapist, but I'm like,
and we were quick.
It's not that simple.
Quick on it too. yeah, and we're quite quick on it. And whereas the case that happened recently, by the way, this lady was driving. She was in the car with her kids, and the 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 gang that raped her is known in that region for doing gang rapes.
Mm.
So it's not it's not news for them. It's literally uh, something that's
Their
commonly
label.
known. It's
Yeah.
talked amongst the locals in that area that oh yeah, there's a gang that rapes women, and one of them was previously convicted for rape and made his way out of prison, which again kind of shows how how unjust the system is for these crimes,
Mm.
and he was back on it in less than 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just tragic.
and yeah, and these countries are so reactive, but they're only reactive until the
It
dust
gets to the
settles.
news. Yeah.
Yeah, when the dust settles, these criminals and these perpetrators, they get away with these things. Um,
Yeah. Another question I have, and this is a question to some of our viewers that might be from, that have some a Pakistani background, open to you as well, Samad, is do you think there'll be any change as a result of the protests going on in Pakistan right now to try and bring
mm.
justice to Marwa and to the lady that was gang raped, or
Well,
is this just going to be the next thing that the next hashtag until we forget and
and
we
then the
forget
next
their
person comes
names,
around.
we
It
forget,
just becomes a cycle.
yeah, it just becomes a cycle.
Yeah, we have to move past, just marching on the streets. I mean, that is the step, that is step one. But beyond that, I think the problem is so deeply rooted um, that
It'll take generations to
it
fix,
will
and
take generations, and it has to start. And honestly speaking, it doesn't have to start with the younger generation. It actually has to start with their parents and
Having the
them
Well,
conversation.
accepting
Yeah.
them accepting the issues with the current system, because you also have to remember that people in their 20s and 30s are heavily dependent on their parents
hmm,
in those countries. They live with their parents. The parents would fund their weddings, their education. So what happens is these kids almost have this
This
unspoken
almost like,
loyalty where they have
yeah.
to, obey the parents because they've put their money into
yeah, they're
their upbringing.
subservient to their parents because
Yeah,
their income or their lifestyle relies on their parents.
yeah, and then parents would also claim that whatever money you make, you're only making it because I was the one who put in the
Gave you
money for
that
your education.
education, yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
it's a very common thing that happens in these in I know for sure in Pakistani culture.
Mm.
So I think the change not doesn't have it's not limited to our generation, or I would say it's the previous generation that really needs to step
I
up.
mean, it's
Bec
the least they can do for not educating them in the first place.
Yeah, it's
well, I
accepting their
mean,
mistakes. I think that's key one. It's letting go of the
well,
egos because it's
th
such a big thing.
that's not going to happen, unfortunately. Like
Yeah,
that,
the
what you
trade-off
think the
is
people with
pretty
institutional power are
stringent.
going to admit that they made a mistake? I don't see that happening
Yeah,
anytime. And
No.
and this is the problem. Like there's almost it like from a state level there seems to be like a tacit like allowance of the stuff that's happening, right? And this is why the people are frustrated, because the people in power are being like, hey, we solved the problem, we solved this problem today, but
yeah,
we're not addressing the wider cultural issues
yeah,
that we're allowing to
I,
continue
I almost
happening.
feel that maybe people don't even want to because it's like, well, that means we have to change our culture if we have to
yeah,
if we
yeah,
have to
yeah.
solve this
It's
Wow, weird.
very, it's so
well,
Weird.
weird when I see
who wants
people
to
who are
change their
so
culture, right?
they defend the culture, with teeth and bone. I find it so bizarre because, you know, what is there to defend, man?
On
That's
one
the way
side,
I
I
look
can
at it.
understand because it gives them a sense of identity. Like this culture gives them literally.
Yeah, rape
Yeah,
culture
yeah, but
gives them
when your
identity.
culture, yeah, yeah, when
No,
your
when
culture, when your cultural identity is like, around like, seeing women as less and
yeah,
treating women like shit and tacitly like allowing like, rape of women to commonly happen in your country, like, I don't
Indiscriminately.
know, yeah,
yeah.
indiscriminately, and then be like, oh,
The
it's the culture, mate, the culture, yeah,
the
great, yeah.
point that I was trying to make with it is that some people hold their culture so close to them because it gives them a sense of identity and everything that they've known that they don't want to accept that there's problems within the culture. And I don't just see it in places like Pakistan, but and Bangladesh and the Desi countries, but also
Oh
like
yeah, all cultures are
um
like that.
no, but also people who have that background that are born here with that culture that they grew up with, like the Desi culture. They also don't they defend the hell out of their culture as well. When it's like
They
you
always,
should know better.
yeah.
Like you're in like in Australia, we don't have a reason to not view these things as bad. Like
Yeah.
we have all the education.
Yeah, I mean, I like to point out
Yeah,
Bangladesh's corruption
exactly.
any
Like we
chance I
know
get.
that it's wrong. Like I'm proud of where I come from and my background, but to
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that,
blindly
you can't call
defend
them
it
out.
is wrong.
Yeah,
In fact, I think we, if the backgrounds that we have, we should call out even more.
Yeah,
Be, when they cross a line.
yeah,
definitely. Um,
I'm not gonna find fault in South Africa when I'm my parents are from Bangladesh and I'm an Aussie. Like I'm gonna find the cultural issues and the challenges of the part that form my identity, right?
yeah. Not just that, but it's like you see, okay, like with South Africa, the problems there. It's like, if you were to call out South Africa and stuff, it's like, why wouldn't you call out your own people
Yeah,
first?
yeah,
You know?
yeah. So another question. I'm asking a lot of questions here, but I kind of want to.
Questions are good.
I want to, before I get to this question, I want to transition across back to this that Delhi rapist, because there's a quote from him, and this is the last quote, and I'll read this out. The death penalty, and again the government decided for this particular case that they would implement the death penalty, and I think they've brought in the death penalty for rape cases as a result of this 2012 incident. Mm-hmm. So he says the death penalty will make things even more dangerous for girls. Now, when they rape, and he's referring to rapists, when they rape, they won't leave the girls like we did. They will kill her. Before, they would rape and say, leave her, she won't tell anyone because of the culture, right? So, mm-hmm. There's taboo around telling anyone and reporting rape. Now, when they rape, especially the criminal types, they will just kill the girl dead, basically. So this, this going back to that psychology, like, do we think what he's said here is that by implementing death penalty on cases of rape that's resulted in the victim's death, or just like the crime has been so heinous and so graphic that it warrants there's no way we'll let someone like that back into society, right?
I think I find that to be a little suggestive more than giving a prediction.
Is this what the rapist said?
This is what the rapist in an interview said.
Yeah.
That if you now kill us for raping, then
we'll kill them.
We'll try and get away with it, right?
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
it almost sounds like a threat.
It's almost like he's suggesting that this is how we will retaliate if you were to kill us, because now we're gonna take it a step further. But I think there's two sides of that, right? Like, death penalty, of course, will push a lot of people away, definitely. And I think those who are out to kill, well, if they can, they will kill regardless. And not everyone has the guts to kill. That also is one of the big things, right?
Yeah. So I want to draw attention maybe to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Right, where we know that death penalty is practiced. They enforce the hudud, the Islamic hudud punishment, or capital punishment, and they hold very public executions of murder, terrorism, and we know. And again, I'm critical about Saudi Arabia. We know that there's human rights violations, but I want to pay attention to. I want to kind of contrast that comment by that rapist, which says, who's saying that death, if you give us the death penalty, well, we'll just murder the person. Well, let's look at an example of what a country that it gives, death penalties for rape. And they Saudi Arabia, with all its faults, has one of the lowest crime rates in the world. And again, they're not a bastion of human rights, so that's not the point I'm making. And possibly they've got the lowest reported incidence of rape in the world. Reported incidence of rape.
Yeah. Are we gonna trust like Saudi Arabian like crime statistics?
Well, no,
we trust Chinese
Saudi
crime
Arabia
statistics?
Saudi Arabia doesn't publish rape statistics.
Oh, they don't.
They don't. But
Okay.
These
I guess we'll just trust them,
reports
right?
come from other human rights organizations.
Mm-hmm.
But even they've claimed that Saudi Arabia have the lowest reported instance of rape and general crime in general.
So my first question is, do you know whether or not Saudi Arabia considers marital rape?
They don't. No.
No.
I mean, unless generally no. That with all, I mean, it's difficult to answer unless there's a specific case. But generally, the answer would be no.
Well, I mean, I can look it up because I'm putting a big bet. I'll bet $100 that they don't. And like I previously mentioned, the vast majority of incidents such as sexual assault and sexual violence usually comes from somebody that you know. So it's going to be somebody like your husband, or it's going to be a family member, right? It's not going to be a random person, right? So this law that kind of punishes people who, commit rape, they might reduce the people who randomly might commit rape in the country, such as Saudi Arabia, but it's not going to necessarily stop.
Very common problem within the families.
Like their husband repeatedly raping them. I'm going to look it up because I actually don't know, but I'm guessing it isn't the case. And
generally, Saudi Arabia doesn't consider like marital rape as rape, generally speaking, unless there's
that's going to be
specific circumstances that would negate that general ruling.
Well, I just looked it up and they don't. So rape is a criminal offense under Sharia law in a wide range of penalties from flogging to execution. The law does not recognize spousal rape as a crime. So that's going to be a big component that they're not counting in their statistics probably when it comes to rape. So
I kind of the caveat.
I'd reject the entire premise.
Well, I don't know whether we can say just because the statistics are
don't count spousal rape.
Well, no, I'm saying just because a country doesn't count. And there's many countries that don't, not just Islamic countries like Saudi Arabia, but many countries that don't consider spousal rape as rape. But I'm saying just because of that particular reason, I wouldn't necessarily say that that's the only reason why their report. That's not the only reason why it's so low. Right?
Yeah, but it gives a big component.
I guess my question really is: do you think? And this is
capital punishment makes a big difference.
That capital punishment acts as a major deterrent for these types of crimes.
Death is always a deterrent for crime. But when it won't, just by me pointing out that they don't consider like spousal rape a form of rape, that already kind of like throws out their entire like crime, like their prevention method.
Sure. My point isn't to say let's do it the way Saudi Arabia is doing it. I'm saying that
but like this reduces a form of rape, but it doesn't solve the problem clearly.
Well, I mean,
but would you say with maybe like beyond the random rapes,
like you see these cases that are happening in Pakistan, India, it's not people like, I mean, obviously there are some
but that's what I'm saying. In places like Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India, spousal rape is probably much higher too, but they're not going to be reported because I looked it up. In Pakistan, it's like unsure, but in India and in Bangladesh, spousal rape isn't a thing. You can't rape someone if they're your spouse. So again, that's going to muddy up their statistics when it comes to rape as well. If you're married to someone and your husband rapes you, it's not rape according to the laws.
Statistics aside, it's more of a if we're saying that we want to prevent rapes from occurring, especially the ones that are as graphic and horrific as what we've discussed today. That do you think that these people should serve just a life sentence in prison, and if they reform, then we'll let them
they don't.
The
well, they don't.
Or if they don't reform, then they just spend the rest of their life in prison, or do we? Is it reasonable to then say, well, if capital punishment would act as a significant deterrent for certain crimes, that we should consider it? Or does that become like again? I don't want to detract
It's
from
a
the
slippery
main
slope.
topic.
We start using capital punishment as a form of like punishment for certain crimes. We're going to open it up to be, I mean, they used to put a capital punishment on like trivial things, not just like egregious things like this. So yeah, I mean, I'd rather like that's the danger, right? Because what if you do put somebody who like like you just mentioned before about the guy who was like drugged out and
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
potentially
It
the
could be
like
a wrongful conviction.
he could be innocent and now he's given the penalty of death, right? There's plenty of instances in America where African Americans have been convicted of rape, and then only through things like DNA testing have been proven that they weren't the rapist, and that only happened because they weren't put to death straight away.
Yep. And I think I was going to comment on that part as well because, yes, when your life is on the line, you will think twice before doing something that could lead to your demise, right?
I mean,
Uh,
like all things in legislation, there's
yep,
trade-offs, right? And
yep,
the trade-off is, yeah, there's a slippery slope. In the past, we didn't have DNA evidence, but should we, now that we do, and if DNA evidence is sufficient, and the threshold is high enough, is it um, is it worth reconsidering death penalty, capital punishment for
Well,
certain crimes?
I
Well,
think I have a problem with that aspect, and one of the biggest problems is corruption in countries like Pakistan, where death penalty is almost used as a bait, or as a way to get revenge, where people are wrongfully convicted and hung. um, it's hardly ever the case where it's the evidence is so clear that it's out in the open, even a blind person can see it. But where your judicial system, even though it's independent, it's easily corrupted. um, and there's so many influences, and where political parties can make such a big impact. So you belong to a certain, like I said again, you belong to a particular ethnic group, and they come into power, they can somehow revise the charter and get you out in by creating loopholes.
Mm.
And the problem is, you know people wrongfully getting convicted, and
Yeah,
the people who are the actual convicts getting away with it
yeah,
because
absolutely. I think any country that where rule of law is fluid,
yeah,
and there's institutional structural corruption and dysfunction at all levels, then there's we can you can see that how death penalty will be used by the ruling parties
yeah,
as a tool against
because you've dishonored the family,
yeah, yeah, absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
And on top of that, you've killed the person, so this person can
Yeah,
never
and again,
testify.
I mean, I'm citing Saudi Arabia as an example. I'm also going to cite that the fact that Saudi Arabia do exactly apply the death penalty for to clerics, religious clerics who don't toe the line, right? Who are critical of the government, and
Yep.
they apply the
sure.
death penalty to them too.
Even
And so
even you look
I
at
can certainly see how that it can be misused,
Yep.
and does get misused in countries that have widespread corruption. Um,
Um, Tak,
Tech
you
wanted to
wanted
say,
to say
yeah.
something? Oh,
Bangladesh
you're.
as well. Like,
Oh, yeah.
sorry, is it's all good? My
Yeah, you're
it's all
good.
good.
You're good.
Yeah. If you look at like Bangladesh, I knew a few years ago they were like hanging politicians left, right, and center just because their viewpoints were, oppose the current government. They lock up politicians like opposition uh, members, members part of like opposition party. They just throw them in jail under like false claims. They don't even properly look into why this person deserves jail time. They
Like
just chuck them in
vigilante
there.
justice almost.
Yeah, almost. And it's they're just persecuting people just because they might pose a threat to the current political party. So yeah, a
Mm.
lot of people that were being hanged in Bangladesh um, under religious extremism, because there is a Bangladeshi party named Jamaati Islam. I don't want to get into it too much because I don't know a lot about it, but like from the bits and pieces that I do know, a lot of people are just being hung over charges like religious extremism, this and that, inciting the people to become extremists, when really they just had opposing views to the current government. So in cases like that, you can see where capital punishment, like although it is an alternative that can deter people from like doing the kind of acts
Yeah.
that we've talked about today. It's
Yeah,
a
I think it's
slippery slope because
absolutely a
it
bad
opens
idea.
up a floodgate.
It's a bad idea. It's a bad
No,
idea in
Minty, I
countries
think it's
that
bad.
aren't. It's a bad idea in countries that have enormous corruption.
It just
Yeah.
opens up
But I
floodgates.
wouldn't necessarily
'Cause
be
just a
opposed to
weapon.
it in like in a country like Australia or the United States
Like
where
you look at
I
New
don't know.
rule of
You
law
see, here's
is
the
paramount.
You look
here's
at
the
New
problem.
Zealand, if they hung the Christchurch shooter, I think they would have done a good job in making that like a
But
really rare occasion.
I
If it was.
I agree in a case where you'd make the person a martyr, in that case you shouldn't apply that rule.
Yep.
But you could make anybody a martyr by killing
I mean,
them.
I
in
don't know whether
capacity.
a
No,
rapist
It's
could be a
hard to
martyr.
make a
Yeah,
rapist.
yeah,
well,
but-
no,
mate.
but I'm saying that like people will politicize anything when it comes
Yeah,
to the
that's
point.
true.
Like I think there was a really good movie. I think actually you showed it to us, Simon. I think it's like
Life of David Gale.
yeah, Life of David
Great
Gale.
movie.
Right,
If
great movie.
anyone's
Highly recommend.
Interested in a way to pass their time over COVID-19.
It's
go
about
watch
the death
Life
penalty.
of David Gale.
Yeah, I remember it. What a great movie, by the way. And yeah, like again, I don't know, things like things like false allegations when it comes to things like crimes, right? Is the reason why we hold the concept of innocent until proven guilty. We're not like Japan, right? Again, Japan's bizarre. They're like guilty until there was like a video game series that I played. It's called Phoenix Wright, and I always found it really weird because like you're on the defense, you're always trying to defend that your client didn't do a crime, and I'm like, it's so weird. Like, why is that the case? But yeah, that's how it is in Japan. You're guilty until proven innocent because they usually have enough stuff on you to charge you before
They do their work beforehand.
Yeah. They do the research beforehand before they charge you. So you have to really try.
They
So
don't
when
charge you on circumstantial evidence.
no, usually that wouldn't be enough. Usually it's like
Yeah.
they have a case against
That's
you,
what I
and
mean, yeah.
you will have to defend like why you were here or why you were there. And you're like, oh, right. So
I was gonna, Adam, before we get lost in
go on.
in the process again, I was gonna ask you to maybe mention that one case that we were talking about, the gang rape.
Oh yeah. So
that's
I only found out about this like today actually because
maybe if you want to run through some facts for the viewers who
yeah,
don't know about it.
So this happened to
Do we need to give a trigger warnings or?
Not really, but
well,
this is also.
I mean, trigger warnings have already proven to not be helpful in assisting people who have triggers anyways, so it wouldn't actually help. Mukhtar Mai, that's her. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
It does, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah. Or when this happened, she was Mukhtar and Bibi. So this event happened in.
So Bibi is more referred to as a younger woman, and Mai is more as a motherly figure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. Is that okay?
I think it's most it's like an elder.
Yeah. Okay. So her brother was abducted by Mastoy men. I don't know.
I think it's a tribe. It's a tribe. It's a tribe in Balochistan, which is a very big province, by the way, and it's not limited to Pakistan. It also exists in Afghanistan and in Iran. So the Baloch tribe as a whole, goes beyond that one country. So and just to give you an idea, they don't follow the local law. They have their own law, and they have their own court, which is
you're going to find out in just a moment some of the stuff that happened. So Mai's brother, who was 14-year-old at the time, he was abducted by 3 Baloch Mastoy men, taken to like a sugar field and then gang raped and sodomized repeatedly. And then when he wouldn't remain silent about it, he was imprisoned. And then later, when the police came, they said that he had in fact was having an affair with like one of like the sisters of one of the men there, and because they're like from a different like caste system, it's like a big no-no, right? And due to like the tribal council there, the punishment for this was that Mukhtar Mai was to be gang raped. That was the punishment for it.
Yep.
And as a result, this became like a really big kind of controversy over there. Because again, like I didn't hear about it, but I think only one of like I think they were all like these six men that were like involved in her rape was subsequently like on the chopping block, like they were going to get a death penalty and stuff. But I think only one of them ended up in the end like being put on like a life imprisonment, while the other five got away with it. So I think it's still technically like an ongoing issue. But yeah, like that's like a big case that happened there, and I didn't know about it. And yeah, it's
There's
bizarre. Like
actually
that.
surprisingly, it's not limited to just like Pakistan or Afghanistan. Like the punishment for adultery or marrying someone outside of your caste in small rural towns within India, they also the tribal leaders will the punishment for that will be gang rape, and it's not uncommon to see that happen even in India. There's a number of well-known cases in India where this has happened, and it seems to happen within very small rural tribes.
Yeah, and again, like I think it kind of reinforces what we were saying earlier about how this is a cultural based issue, right? Because again, they have laws that are against rape, but then in these kind of tribal courts and in these caste systems, this continues to happen,
Mm.
and nobody's held
So,
responsible.
yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because we do, we talk about these high profile cases, but in there's all of this stuff going on, the mistreatment of women, gang rapes that are given as a punishment to women in certain areas, and largely groups are silent about it, and it's
Yeah.
interesting. Even we had the Me Too movement that kind of swept through Western countries, and I know that there's some people who may have reservations about the effectiveness of that movement, but I feel like is it, or maybe it's a question to our panelists and viewers, is it important to have a similar type of movement in some of these countries?
Well, I mean, the Me Too movement is like kind of like a really kind of specific like kind of area of exploitation of women or people in positions of power taking advantage of those in lower positions, right? And in a way, like a lot of the kind of problems that we're seeing, like in these, like for example, this example that I just gave you, like part of the reason why the punishment was given was because one person was in a higher caste and the other one was in a lower caste, right? Like that's an example of like their institutional power taking advantage of someone who's in a lower system, right? Now,
Mm.
I don't know, like yeah, there should be like movements that highlight these problems, but I don't know if highlighting, like people know that this happens in Pakistan. It's not like Pakistan, India, Bangladesh. I don't want to like just kind of focus on one thing. It happens like everywhere there. But like the point is, people know that this happens. It isn't like when you hear this on the news. Like when I see this on the news, I don't like. Unfortunately, I don't get surprised. Like I
Mm.
hear this, and it's just like, shit.
Yeah, I mean,
But it's
there's
like,
one thing which is drawing attention, and I think people are aware of what's going on. The other thing is having enough momentum behind a movement to hold people accountable, and that whether that's you know certain men that behave this way, or institutions or people in power who aren't doing enough to protect women, right? Um, so in the case of Me Too, it's that certain powerful men had for a long time exerted their power over women by asking for like certain favors, and we that that went ignored, even though the victims were so far and wide, but it was ignored for such a long time until a movement of this nature kind of came about. And I don't know whether it'll be effective, but I think it's multi-pronged, right? You need to try different things. It's because it's not going to be one, as you mentioned, it's not going to be just
Well,
one thing that solves the problem. There's no silver bullet here,
I don't even
like
think
with
the
most
Me Too
problems.
movement has been really a successful movement either, because there's even cases of, you know, for example, like women in like, you know, in you know, certain businesses, like usually like part of like, you know, the general culture is, oh, like, you know, you can have like a one-on-one interview with a like with a man and a woman. Now like it's, oh well, they need to be like a witness, or you need to have the door open, because now you can't have those kind of what would have considered to be regular conversation. It's resulting in like managers being like, well, I need to cover myself because I don't want to have like a Me Too charge. And as a result, like women are missing out on opportunities, like being invited to like work-based functions and work-based like trips and stuff, because you know they want to be, oh well, I don't want to be alone, and I don't want to get a Me Too charge either. So yeah, there has to be, if there's going to be a movement, it has to be something that's able to address the issues and get people like holding, I guess, not only just the communities responsible, but the government responsible. And I don't know if that's going to happen, if especially if you look at, you know, the problems that you know, happening in like Karachi, for example, right, where sorry, not Karachi, Kashmir, right? Like they have like India completely like locked that whole area down and prevented like internet coming and seeing what's really happening there. I don't know if we really know what's happening there at the moment. In
Everything is
terms of,
just, yeah,
yeah,
it's just secondhand information. There's
yeah, it's only
nothing. Yeah.
secondhand information. So you know that's the kind of level of corruption that we're dealing with the governments holding information there. How effective will a social media movement be when the governments be like, tell Twitter and Facebook
Yeah,
and
we'll
all
shut
these
down
things,
Twitter and
hey,
Facebook,
shut this
and
down. We
they've
don't
done
want
that
this
before.
hash.
In
Yeah, we don't
Bangladesh,
want this.
they actually did that in Bangladesh.
And
Did they?
when I was talking
What
about
did they
those
do with that?
when I was talking about those hangings, that's exactly what they were doing at that time as
Yeah.
well.
So during
Uh,
during those the these trials against religious extremists,
mm,
they shut down social media. They did that also um, during the protesting around the, remember that the incident with the unlicensed bus driver that plowed through some university students, and there was all these rioting. They shut down social media,
uh,
and there was like a media blackout.
Right.
So
Yeah,
so
yeah.
these,
I
yeah,
mean, we're pretty famous for media blackouts. What can I say? Yeah, look, I don't want to be like a negative Nancy, but I'm just trying to, I'm like, I'm looking at it, I'm like, yeah, like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
I think the way that I want to wrap it up is by simply saying that it all starts with a conversation. It starts with a conversation with your parents, with your close friends, within your community, and also speaking out if you see anything um, that you know it's not right. Whether it's the way a young girl is being treated, or maybe an older woman's being treated. Any comments that people are making, because that's where it starts. It's always seen as harmless in the
Yeah.
beginning, and then it leads to bigger issues and these actions. So don't be shy about it. Don't feel like you're offending anyone, because you could prevent something big and you could save someone's life, ultimately. So start with having that conversation, start with changing your own mindset towards these issues, instead of putting the blame on someone else. If someone parks the car in front of your driveway, you're still not allowed to hit the car. It's one of right? So even if someone, unlawfully parks a car right in front of your driveway, and you're trying to leave that your driveway, you still can't hit that car and say, "Hey, you parked it right, right at the exit, so I'm gonna hit you and drive away and not face any consequences." The insurance is still gonna pull up on you, because you are responsible for your own actions. So you can't put the blame on someone else for for how they dress or how they talk, um, and and their action. You need to take the accountability in this regard. um, no matter how a woman dresses,
mm.
it doesn't justify any of that. And you got to fix your own actions. Stop with the with objectifying women. Stop with making comments if you see someone dressed a certain way. And this is going out to the younger guys, because you still see that even in the Western society, where
Yeah,
I've
no,
been
no
out.
locker room talk.
No.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I'd like to point out something as well. Like, yeah, like you know, all this culture of things like you know, slut shaming and stuff. Like, yeah, there's a big problem of people kind of contributing to things that kind of devalue people based on their appearance, right? And to be fair, like one of a big contingent of that is also female intersexual competition, which is essentially a fancy way of saying other women denigrating other women on how they look too. So it's again, it's a problem that both sexes
Me
contribute
girls.
to.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's a term that they use called the pick
Oh,
me
okay,
girls.
yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, and yeah, so it's a problem that's that both of the sexes can kind of that we can together as a whole can try and
I'll
contribute in reducing. Yeah, sorry, Tak, what were
yeah.
you going
No,
to
I
say?
was gonna say I'll take it one step further and say like for the viewers and everyone watching, I'd say it starts with yourself. Like, I mean, obviously, I'm not saying everyone else is going out and doing bad things, but you should see like how are you affecting this negatively, and if there's anything you need to do to change that. Because before you try to change the outlook of other people, or try to get them to think a certain way, or even try to educate them, you got to look in like within and see, is there a problem in the way I think first and foremost
Yeah.
before anything.
Reflect on yourself, critique yourself, but also if you hear your anyone, whether even if it's your own parents or your siblings, say things like, "Well, she shouldn't have been out at night," or "She shouldn't have been dressed that way." Hold them accountable for their words.
Yeah.
Don't let comments like that slide, because if you want to change what's acceptable socially acceptable attitudes to hold and beliefs to hold, you need to hold people accountable when they think, when they wrong think. Uh, you know,
Also,
Yeah, and it starts at home. That's
starts
that's
at home.
that's the
It's
important part.
always home, and that's the grassroots level.
And speaking of home, right? I guess that's a great way to transition into our next topic because we're going to be stuck at home for a lot longer because of the lockdown. Now, did you guys hear about? I think they extended the state of emergency and state of disaster by like 4 weeks or something like that.
so
Um,
I know on the 28th of September we were supposed to have like restrictions eased. So the on the roadmap, if you look at where September 28th was or whatever, that's been pushed to October 11th now.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So does that mean that we're not getting that corona-free Christmas? Is that what you're telling me?
I
Yeah,
think
They're
probably
saying
not.
it's all
I think
dependent on the
Andrews,
numbers.
if he doesn't want a coup on his hands, will do everything within his power to open up the state
To open up before
before
Christmas, do you
Christmas.
reckon?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so because I haven't been paying attention to the counts because I know like the counts are slowly kind of reducing, but it's something that people are being frustrated about, and subsequently it has led to the Queen Victoria Market protest, which 74 people got arrested. I warned everybody last week. Don't go to these things. It's one big honeypot. You're going to get arrested. And look, 74 people got arrested. It's bizarre.
I mean, because it's
Yeah,
all
my my
it's
my thoughts are we're at the home stretch. Like we're so close to getting those numbers below the threshold for the reducing the lockdowns to the next phase. Um, and these idiots are out there,
they want to
possibly
claim that
being
they're the
super
ones who got us the
spreaders,
freedom.
But
They
then
want to
how
claim.
possibly
how do
super
you
spreaders.
reason with someone when they tell you that um COVID's just as deadly as the common flu? Like the common flu has more death rates.
That's a
You
very
still have
common belief
you
amongst
still have
these
people with
this group
that
of
kind of
people. Yeah.
sentiment that are at these rallies because they think that COVID's not as dangerous. So how do you even talk to these people and have a discussion with them?
I don't know if it's necessary to. Like, I don't think, to
I
be
think I
honest,
think I might have screwed up. Sorry.
I don't think you can. It's like there's so many people that hold these beliefs. You're not gonna, for every one person you convince, there's going to be another three more who hold these stupid beliefs.
Yeah.
And so let them hold their beliefs. There's just no point in arguing with these people. I don't think you'll convince them. And if anything, they'll probably double down, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the problem, right? Like, eventually, like people like these like again, protests shouldn't be happening. They shouldn't be happening back when in June, and they shouldn't be happening now either. But unfortunately, because of the frustration that people are feeling. Like I think the unemployment rate is still going up here, right?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, right?
Yep.
So it's only going up.
So
People are
we're at 9% unemployment. We're nearly double-digit unemployment, guys.
right. Yeah. So and part of, like, again, I'd like to point out, like, all of that is like artificially induced, right? Like, in the sense, because the government is saying you need to stay home, and so people's livelihoods are being affected, and so this is how they're quote unquote lashing out. During, I think, the March period, we had that section. People were like, okay, we'll stick around, we'll comply, so on and so forth. And now people, it's like a boiling point is what is happening, and it's only got. I trust me, this is like the second week of anti-lockdown protest. It's going to happen next week too.
I'm going to make a huge generalization. I'll probably get in trouble for it, but
yeah, go ahead.
Maybe many of these people that are going to these anti-lockdown protests were probably on the dole before this, and will probably continue to be on the dole after this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to make any wide branching opinions, but it could be. But it's like, again, it really comes down to an education and education, but then a lack of, I guess, faith in the Andrews government as well, right? Like, people are like, even people who are with Andrews are like, bruh, what's going on? What's going on here? You know.
I'm one of those people.
You're one of those people. What's going on?
The thing is, it's not that I'm.
Does Sultan say, "I am part of the Brody Boys"? What does Sultan mean by that?
Sultan,
by that,
man, you deserve jail time.
You deserve the $1,600 fine.
Playing soccer on the 7th
come on, we can't say that to one of our viewers.
You guys deserve jail time. You guys can maybe watch us from jail if they have YouTube there.
You share it with all your jail mates.
Yeah, get them to like and subscribe.
Yeah.
Bell icon.
Again, if you like our content, always bing, bang, bong. Like, subscribe, bell icon. That's it. You need to do it.
But yeah, I don't think there's much to say about this protest, because it's not that different to
it's just bigger.
It's continuity of that one.
It's just change of scenery.
Yeah. See, I wonder if the protest happened like a flash mob, right? Like, how like people are just like slowly like walking past Vic Market, and then they all just suddenly jump out like, oh, we're in a protest, right? Like,
always, like if you watch the news, because there were a few people that were handcuffed and taken back behind like the police, like in the cars and that, and then you have like reporters like putting the microphone to them. Some people are saying like, oh, there was this one dude who was trying to say he was doing this in the name of Jesus. So like,
yeah, I saw
that. Yeah, I saw that. I was like, okay,
Jesus. Given up even talking about how it's infringing their freedom of rights. Now they're saying it's like religious.
Yeah, it's like a crusade. It's like it's a hidden crusade.
Or whatever gets them to like
stay
protesting, right? Like, yeah.
They just want to go out and have the time of their lives, and someone's telling them not to, saying behave, stay at home.
Yeah,
and they don't like it.
There was anti-mask protest in Utah, I think.
Yeah, there was, and one of the ladies made it.
Yeah,
did you see the comment?
Yeah, it was so stupid. She's like, way George Floyd said, "I can't breathe," and she was like pretty much saying like how it ties into these people can't breathe because they're wearing masks. I'm like, George Floyd couldn't breathe because someone had their knee on his neck. The police officer had his knee on George Floyd's neck, not because he had to wear a mask. Like, I don't know where people.
I mean,
they're just.
You thought she was smart about it.
Yeah, people are just pulling random sort of sentiments to kind of support their arguments, when really it's just they just want to go out. And it's like, we all want to go out. No one wants to be stuck at home.
Yeah, we're so close to you.
That's true. Nobody does. Look, I get that extra hour of exercise now. Thank you, Dictator Dan, for giving me that extra hour. I'm loving it.
Sit out till 9 o'clock.
Also, I think
this last part of the show to Dictator Dan.
Dictator Dan. Oh, look, we love Dictator Dan over here. But the thing that I found really interesting, like even Israel, I think they're also going to their second round of lockdowns as well, and it's quite interesting because like it's different to ours. Because for example, like they're allowing like 10 people to up to 10 people in a household, but then you can only you must stay within like 500 meters of your house, right? Like we get like what is it, five kilometers
distance.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, like, but you can have 10 people. So it's like, it's really interesting, like how we're going to be seeing the strategies that different countries and are handling their form of lockdown. So we'll see whether or not, because I think Israel also kind of had the same problem that we had, whereas we got very overconfident and reopened really quickly. And then they had a second round of cases. Same thing over here. We opened up really quickly.
Too quickly.
And then we got a bunch of second round cases, which is not a surprise, but hey, that's the place where we are. And yeah, I mean, stay safe and use that extra hour of exercise.
Use
That's
it
what
wisely. Don't use it all at once.
Exactly.
But that is the end of our show today. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. It was a challenging one, and it was good to get the perspectives of different people, especially our female viewers. And if you liked what you heard today, subscribe, tell your friends, and tune in next week.
Cool. Catch you later,
Thanks, guys. See ya.
See ya.